National Human Rights Commission, India Commission has taken suo motu cognizance of a media report alleging increasing incidents of violence among inmates in Tihar jail of Delhi. Reportedly, in yet another incident of inmate clash inside the prison, a 25-year-old prisoner was beaten up by another on the 22nd of September 2021, which was the sixth incident in this month alone. The Commission has observed that the contents of media reports, if true, raise serious issue of human rights violations of the prisoners in custody of state. Accordingly, it has issued notices to the Chief Secretary and DG, Prisons, Gov. of NCT of Delhi calling for a detailed report with 4 weeks, including steps taken or proposed to be taken to address the issue of violence in Tihar jail. Issuing the notices, the Commission has noted that such incidents of violence inside the jail indicate towards negligence by the prison authorities resulting into gross violation of human rights of the inmates in custody of the state. According to the media report, carried on the 24th of September 2021, the latest victim of violence in the Tihar jail told during investigation that he was first abused and beaten up by another inmate. The same day a head matron was injured during a scuffle with an inmate. Reportedly, about 30 inmates have been injured during September this year due to clashes in the jail. Tihar jail, which houses some of the most dangerous criminals in the country, has been in the news over the past few months for all the wrong reasons: incidents of inmate violence, prison officials conniving and running extortion rackets, and killing of individuals at the hands of the jail staff are rampant in capital's maximum security prison. In this backdrop, Sunil Gupta, author and a prison expert, who has served as a law officer and a spokesperson at Tihar jail for almost 4 decades, speaks about what ails the jail administration and if there is a better way to tackle the situation. There have been at least 15 incidents of violence inside since July. Have such occurrences been common during your tenure, or the current state of affairs be called unprecedented? It would be wrong to say that such incidents didn't occur in the past. During my tenure there were scuffles too. Inmate fights are common, as jails are known as the garbage dumps of a civilized society, but the level of indiscipline inside Tihar has undoubtedly increased. Tihar has, of course, been infamous for prison breaks and staff malpractices, for which we have been pulled up time and again by the National Human Rights Commission. But the current state of affairs shows the management is going downhill, and unless drastic changes are made to the staff structure and overall functioning of the prison, such instances are here to stay. Why do such brawls become common inside the prison? Is there a particular reason, such as past rivalries or one-upmanship among inmates? The increased presence of Delhi-based gangsters could be one of the reasons. 6. Most of the criminals belong to up in Haryana. If rival gang members are kept in the same cell or barrack, or if a gang leader gets to know that an inmate has helped his rival or is part of an opponent's gang, then friction is bound to happen. Such violence is also caused by lack of identification, as it is the police's duty to inform beforehand as to which gang the accused belongs to. Most of such fights inevitably involve knives, blades or other sharp weapons, which are seized from the inmate's possession. How does the inmates get hold of such possession? How do the inmates get hold of such items? Are they smuggled into jail? While these items can easily be smuggled with the connivance of the prison staff, most of the weapons are improvised and are procured in-house. Often, the inmates breaks the parts of the fan inside their barrack or cell or destroy the television and use its internal parts as weapons. They even cut the steel plates on which food is served in order to use the sharp end for attacks. It is not practical to expect jail guards to keep an eye on such things throughout the day. The possession of mobile phones among inmates is an open secret. The phones are used to run extortion rackets from inside the jail or carrying out hit jobs outside. How are they able to make use of phones when there are jammers installed? Yes, there is rampant use of mobile phones. A common way to smuggle mobiles into Tihar is to throw them over the boundary walls, a major portion of which is very close to residential areas. The scenario in both Tihar and Mandoli jail is such that if someone throws something from outside, it will eventually fall in the hands of the intended inmates. About jammers, inmates cut their power supplies as they themselves carry out all the electric work of the jail. Moreover, the jammers use old technology and cannot catch 4 grams signal. Scuffles between jail staff and industrials have come to light. In gangster Ankit Gujar murder case, 4 prison officials were suspended and a case was lodged against them. While the matter is now being probed by the CBI, what leads to such incidents? While several allegations have been made by Ankit's family in the petition about his killing, the misconduct and misbehavior on the part of the jail officials does not come as a surprise. In my experience, the majority of such incidents occurs when there is a sense of hostility between the jail staff and the inmates. Caste rivalries also plays out when an inmate and jail officials belong to different castes. Why is it that in many of these incidents, the role of jail staff has been revealed? Is there a deep-rooted structural problem in their posting, or is this a negligence on the part of the administration? While negligence has always been there, one of the most pressing problems in my view, has led to the present situation as the deputation of incompetent officers at commanding posts. What Tihar needs right now are young and energetic officers. A majority of the jail staffs are DANICS Delhi, Andaman and Nicobar Islands civil services officers. But instead of fresh recruits, promoted DANICS personnel are deputed, which leads to maladministration as they do not possess the requisite competence and expertise to handle jail affairs. Also, there is lack of coordination between staff members. Can the current mismanagement be attributed to Tihar being one of the most overcrowded, understaffed prisons in India? Absolutely. Jails have always been a low priority area as governments only plan to build either hospitals or schools. The problem of overcrowding arises because there are not enough prisons. It might be a long shot, but in light of the current events, is there a chance of a full-fledged prison break or violence inside Tihar? No, a prison escape won't be possible in the current scenario as the entire jail premises by the Tamil Nadu Special Police Force. Other paramilitary forces such as Central Reserve Police Force and the Indo-Tibetan Border Police are also deployed at Tihar. What drastic changes do you think are needed to address Tihar's current situation? To curb prisoner fights, inmates in cells and barracks should be frisked every day and surprise checks should be carried out under the supervision of senior officers. During my tenure, such checks were the norm and still are, but they should now be intensified. In case of negligence or collusion, responsibility should be fixed on the jail officials concerned and departmental action should be taken. Moreover, there is no training center for the prison staff to help them understand the rule of law and human rights of inmates, and steps should be taken in this regard. Do you think behavioral changes need to be inculcated in inmates in order to curb such incidents of violence? Should parole and furlough be encouraged as a means of reform? After spending years in prison, there is a pent-up anger and frustration among inmates. The provisions of furlough were brought in with the intention to reform prisoners and help them reconnect with the outer world. Hence, they should be promoted. To encourage reform, the concept of bail is the rule and jail is the exception should also be upheld by courts. Seeing the current scenario, should not the judiciary take suo motu cognizance of the happenings inside Tihar jail and pass a stringent order? Yes, it should, but unfortunately a Supreme Court panel on prison reforms headed by Justice Amitav Roy was formed and it had issued crucial directions in February last year, but they have not been followed. Even if the judiciary takes cognizance of these cases, I hardly think it would make an impact on ground. Prison establishments in India exist at three levels: the taluka level, district level, and central, sometimes called zonal range level. The jails in these levels are called sub-jails, district jails, and central jails respectively. In general, the infrastructure, security, and prisoner facilities such as medical, educational and rehabilitation are progressively better from sub-jail to central jail. The other types of jail establishments are women jails, bostel schools, open jails and special jails. National Human Rights Commission, India Commission has taken suo motu cognizance of a media report alleging increasing incidents of violence among inmates in Tihar jail of Delhi. Reportedly, in yet another incident of inmate clash inside the prison, a 25-year-old prisoner was beaten up by another on the 22nd of September 2021, which was the sixth incident in this month alone. The Commission has observed that the contents of media reports, if true, raise serious issue of human rights violations of the prisoners in custody of state. Accordingly, it has issued notices to the Chief Secretary and DG, Prisons, Gov. of NCT of Delhi calling for a detailed report with 4 weeks, including steps taken or proposed to be taken to address the issue of violence in Tihar jail. Issuing the notices, the Commission has noted that such incidents of violence inside the jail indicate towards negligence by the prison authorities resulting into gross violation of human rights of the inmates in custody of the state. According to the media report, carried on the 24th of September 2021, the latest victim of violence in the Tihar jail told during investigation that he was first abused and beaten up by another inmate. The same day a head matron was injured during a scuffle with an inmate. Reportedly, about 30 inmates have been injured during September this year due to clashes in the jail. District jails serve as the main prisons in states and union territories where there are no central jails. States which have considerable number of district jails are Uttar Pradesh 57, Madhya Pradesh 39. Bihar 31, Maharashtra 28, Rajasthan 24. Assam 22, Karnataka 19. Jharkhand 17 and Haryana 16. Gujarat 11. Kerala 11. West Bengal 12. Chhattisgarh 11. Jammu and Kashmir and Nagaland 10 each 6. Central jail. The criteria for a jail to be categorized as a central jail varies from state to state. However, The common feature observed throughout India is that prisoners sentenced to imprisonment for a long period, more than 2 years, are confined in the central jails, which have larger capacity in comparison to other jails. These jails also have rehabilitation facilities. Delhi has the highest number of 16 central jails, followed by Madhya Pradesh having 11, Maharashtra, Punjab, Rajasthan and Tamil Nadu with 9 each. Karnataka has 8 central jails, Gujarat has 4 central prisons. Arunachal Pradesh, Meghalaya, Andaman and Nicobar Islands, Dadra and Nagar Haveli, Daman and Diu and Lakshadweep do not have any central jails. Sub-jails are smaller institutions situated at a sub-divisional level in the states. 9 states have reported comparatively higher number of sub-jails, revealing a well-organized prison setup even at lower formation. These states are Maharashtra 100, Andhra Pradesh 99, Tamil Nadu 96, Madhya Pradesh 72, Karnataka 70, Orissa 73, Rajasthan 60, Telangana and West Bengal 33 each. Orissa had the highest capacity of inmates in various sub-jails. 7 states or union territories have no sub-jails, namely Arunachal Pradesh, Haryana, Manipur, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland, Sikkim, Chandigarh and Delhi. Open jails are minimum security prisons. Only convicted prisoners with good behavior satisfying certain norms prescribed in the prison rules are admitted in open jails. Minimum security is kept in such prisons and prisoners are engaged in agricultural activities. P.T. Chachko, Home Minister of Kerala, introduced first open jail in India, Nettukutheri near Trivandrum on 28 August 1962. 17 states have functioning open jails in their jurisdiction. Rajasthan reported the highest number of 29 open jails. There are no open jails in any of the union territories at the end of 2015. Special jails are maximum security prisons for the confinement of a particular class or particular classes of prisoners. Prisoners housed in special jails are generally being convicted of offenses such as terrorism, violent crimes, habitual offenders, serious violations of prison discipline, and inmates showing tendencies towards violence and aggression. Kerala has the highest number of special jails, 16. Provision for keeping female prisoners in these special jails is available in Tamil Nadu, West Bengal, Gujarat, Kerala, Assam, Karnataka and Maharashtra. Women's jails are prisons that exclusively house female prisoners. Women's jails may exist at the sub-divisional, district and central zone range level. There were 20 women's jails across India with a total capacity of 5,197 and an occupancy rate of 60.1% as on 31 December 2016. Due to the limited capacity of women's jails, most female prisoners are housed at other types of jails. As on 31 December 2016, around 83.12% of all female prisoners in India were incarcerated at jails other than a women's jail. Maharashtra has 5 women's jails. Kerala and Tamil Nadu each have 3 women's jails. Over the past 5 years, there has been an increasing trend in the number of women prisoners in India. The population statistics say women account for only 4.3% of all prisoners, which is about 17,834 women. According to a study in 2009, Homicide was the single most common conviction offense for women in India. Bostel schools are a type of youth detention center and are used exclusively for the imprisonment of minors or juveniles. The primary objective of Bostel schools is to ensure care, welfare and rehabilitation of young offenders in an environment suitable for children and keep them away from contaminating atmosphere of the prison. The juveniles in conflict with law detained in Bostel schools are provided various vocational training and education with the help of trained teachers. The emphasis is given on the education, training and moral influence conducive for their reformation and prevention of crime. 9 states namely, Himachal Pradesh, Jharkhand, Karnataka, Kerala, Maharashtra, Punjab, Rajasthan, Tamil Nadu and Telangana have Bostel schools in their respective jurisdictions. Tamil Nadu had the highest capacity for keeping 678 inmates. Himachal Pradesh and Kerala are the only states that have the capacity to lodge female inmates in 2 of their Bostel schools. There are no Bostel schools in any of the UTs at the end of 2015. Other jails that do not fall into the categories discussed above, fall under the category of other jails. 3 states, Karnataka, Kerala and Maharashtra, have 1 other jail each in their jurisdiction. No other state or union territory has any other jail at the end of 2016. The capacity of inmates male and female reported by these 3 states in such jails was highest in Karnataka, 250, followed by Kerala, 142, Goa, 45, and Maharashtra, 28. Budget. All states and union territories in India had a combined sanctioned budget of 54.6338 billion rupees, 730 million United States dollars, in 2016-17, an increase of 5.9% over the previous fiscal, for prison-related expenditure. Uttar Pradesh alone accounted for 12.72 billion rupees, 170 million United States dollars, of the total budget. Prison expenditure is broadly categorized as plan expenditure and non-plan expenditure. Expenditure on specific planned activities under the 5-year plan is termed as plan expenditure. Expenditure made for meeting day-to-day expenses and running establishments like payment of salaries, wages, rent, etc. come under the non-plan expenditure. Non-plan expenditure may also include activities for development of existing infrastructure and bringing about improvements in the prisons. Expenditure on prison inmates is categorized as food, clothing, medical, vocational, educational facilities, welfare and other expenses. Food expenses account for 65% of the total expenditure on prison inmates. Demographics. There were 433,003 prisoners in jails across India as on the 31st of December 2016. Males at 414,505 make up 95.73% of prisoners, while females at 18,498 represent 4.27%. Most prisoners are between 30 to 50 years old, 44.0%, followed by age group of 18 to 30 years, 43.1%, and above 50 years, 13.0%. 41 inmates were between the ages of 16 and 18 years as on the 31st of December 2016. There were 1,649 female prisoners with 1,942 children as on the same date. The education literacy profile of prisoners as on the 31st of December 2016 was below matriculation, 42%, illiterate, 28.4%, above matriculation but below graduation, 21%, graduated secondary school, 5.9%. Postgraduates 1.8%, and technical diploma degree holders 1%. The majority of prisoners are housed in a jail from their home state. Around 91.1% of prisoners belong to the state in which the prison is located, while 7.5% hailed from other states, and 1.5% were foreign citizens. The number of foreign prisoners in India was 6,370 as on the 31st of December 2016, a decrease of 5.4% from the previous year. Among convicted foreign prisoners, the highest number are from Bangladesh 75.7%, 1,792 convicts, followed by Nepal 8.9%, 211 convicts, and Myanmar 4.3%, 101 convicts. Types of prisoners. A criminal prisoner is defined as any prisoner duly committed to custody under the writ, warrant or order of any court or authority exercising criminal jurisdiction, or by order of a court-martial. All other prisoners are considered civil prisoners. Prison inmates lodged in Indian jails are categorized as convicts, individuals and detainees. A convict is a criminal prisoner under sentence of a court or court-martial. An individual is a person who has been committed to judicial custody and against whom a criminal trial has been initiated by a competent authority. Trial is in process and not yet disposed of. A detainee is any person detained in prison on the orders of the competent authority under the relevant preventive laws. As on the 31st of December 2016, there were 135,683 convicts, 293,058 individual inmates and 3,089 detainees in India. Types of offences among convicts. The highest number of inmates are serving sentences for convictions of murder 51.86%, rape 7.66%, offences under the NDPS Act 5.73%, attempted murder 5.30%, dowry deaths 3.88%, and theft 2.84%. As on the 31st of December 2016. The overwhelming majority of convicts, around 87.82%, are convicted of offences under the Indian Penal Code, while 12.05% are convicted under special and local laws. Among individuals, the highest number of inmates are being held under charges of murder 22.14%, rape 8.71%, attempted murder 8.03%, theft 8.94%, offences under the NDPS Act 5.88%, and dowry deaths 4.43%, as on the 31st of December 2016. Around 80.73% of individuals are charged with offences under the Indian Penal Code, while 19.25% are charged with violating special and local laws. About 2.8% of convicts admitted to jails across India in 2016 were repeat offenders. Prison conditions. Prison conditions in India are bad and unhealthy as they are frequently life-threatening, and do not meet international standards. Prisons were severely overcrowded with an occupancy rate of 114%. Prison lacks so much funding that in some areas occupancy level is as high as 277%, almost 3 times the permitted capacity. Labor-only convicts sentenced to rigorous imprisonment have to undertake work during their prison term. A 2011 Hindustan Times article reported that 99% of convicts that receive such sentences rarely undertake work because most prisons in India do not have sufficient demand for prison labor. A 2020 report found that labor within the prisons of many states was assigned on the basis of caste, since most prison manuals are still based on the Prisons Act of 1894. Occupancy rate. One of the primary reasons for the overcrowding of prisons is the pendency of court cases. As on March 31, 2016, more than 3 crore cases are pending in various courts, and 2 of every 3 prison inmates in the country are under trials. The 19,623 prisoners of 2015, for example, included 82,076 under trials, or 67%, according to NCRB data. Some other causes for big pre-trial population are corruption, role of police, prosecutors, and judiciary. Indian police system is heavily understaffed and underpaid. It contributes to high detainees population since there are less officials for accused prisoners to accompany them to court. So, their date for hearing keeps getting pushed back. Prosecutors in India are also substantially burdened. There are many vacant assistant posts, but no incentive has been made to fill those posts to fast-track the process. Judiciary Department also contributes to such extensiveness of pre-trial detainees. There is a backlog of 30 million cases in India. With so many cases to handle, the number of judges in India is comparatively very low. There are only 10.5 judges on average per every million people. Many of the pre-trial detainees are poor and underprivileged. Even though for some of them bail is approved, they still cannot get out because they do not have the money or resources to pay out the bail. Many of detainees are also uneducated and completely unaware of their rights. About 71% of pre-trial detainees are illiterate and do not even have a high school diploma. Torture in the lockups is routine. Attorneys who regularly defend those who have been held in such lockups describe to us the frequency of the third degree, a term commonly used in India to cover practices that are fairly described as torture, as ranging from far more than half of all detainees in Bombay, to virtually all detainees in New Delhi. One of the small civil liberties groups in India, the People's Union for Democratic Rights (PUDR) in New Delhi, published a brief report in October 1990 on deaths in police custody in that city. Most of the cases cited in the report came to the PUDR's attention because of newspaper accounts. In a city with less than 1% of the national population, the report enumerates 48 deaths in police custody from 1980 to 1989, most of them of persons under the age of 30. The PUDR alleges that most of these people died due to severe beating and prolonged torture. Practically every person taken to a police station in connection with some or the other offense in our country is subjected to severe beating and torture sticks, boots and belts. And wooden rollers are the most common instruments of beating. Sexual abuse, designed not only to hurt but also to humiliate, is part of the torture. Naked or semi-naked men are a common sight in police lockups. It is this process of torture, regular and systematic, whose end product is sometimes death, as in the case of these unfortunate 48 people in Delhi. The report also cites the findings of other civil liberties groups in other parts of India which also generally based their reports on press accounts. In 1988, 20 deaths in police custody were reported in the state of Andhra Pradesh, 15 in Bihar, 8 in Kerala, 22 in Uttar Pradesh, 19 in West Bengal. No nationwide figures are available. Yet if experience elsewhere is a guide, press accounts of such episodes fall far short of presenting a complete picture. Aside from these lock-up deaths, there is the matter of disappearances. As in other countries like Sri Lanka and El Salvador, some of the victims are individuals who died under torture and whose bodies were then disposed of to conceal how they were killed. One Indian state in which disappearances have been recorded is Andhra Pradesh, of which the capital is the city of Hyderabad. In January 1990, the Andhra Pradesh Civil Liberties Committee published an open letter to the Chief Minister of the state. In addition to describing 111 deaths in police lockups in the state from 1984 to 1989, in each case the organization cited the police explanation for the death and contrasted this with its own findings. The Civil Liberties Group enumerated 21 disappearances after arrest during the same period. Most of the bodies of the victims were never found. In a few cases, as in one in which the body had been run over by a train and another that had been burned, an effort had apparently been made to obscure the causes of death. 8. A comprehensive nationwide compilation of deaths in police custody, it appears, would number in the hundreds each year. No doubt some of these deaths are due to natural causes or to suicides. Unfortunately, though post-mortem examinations are routinely conducted, it is almost unheard of for family medical representatives to take part, and the results of post-mortems are often not made available to families or lawyers for the deceased. The doctors who conduct autopsies are often themselves police employees. For Hindu victims, the practice of cremating the dead, of course, negates the possibility of subsequent independent autopsies when doubts are raised about the findings of these police doctors. We looked into a 1990 case in Delhi in which a doctor Acharan had taken the unusual step of refusing to issue a certificate of natural death in connection with a death in police custody that had resulted from a beating. The police had claimed in this case that tuberculosis was the cause of death. Though the post-mortem examination did reveal an old lesion due to tuberculosis, the doctor persisted in his finding that this had nothing to do with the death. His examination made it clear, he insisted, that the young man who had died in a lockup was beaten to death. In this case, the post-mortem was conducted by a resident who specialized in forensic medicine at a large teaching hospital in South Delhi, the All Indian Institute of Medical Sciences. We interviewed the president of the Resident Doctors Association, Dr. Animesh, at the hospital, who told us that the police had applied great pressure on Dr. Acharan to change his findings. Such pressure was usually effective, Dr. Animesh informed us, because virtually all employment opportunities for those trained in forensic medicine are in the service of the police. Most doctors simply take the word of the police, he told us. Resistance to police pressure succeeded in this case, he said, for two reasons. The entire Resident Doctors Association, with a membership of about 600, had backed up Dr. Acharan, who established that a beating led to the death, and because the particular finding had been made by a doctor who did not seek a position with the police as he had taken a teaching position at the hospital. Despite the unavailability of such medical evidence in the great majority of cases to establish conclusively that these deaths in custody are attributable to torture, the number of young people who perish during relatively brief periods of confinement in police lockups makes it clear that something is seriously wrong with the way they are treated. What takes place in custody confirms the view expressed by a Deputy Inspector General of Police, Salendra Misra, who has written that the brutal behavior of our police is established beyond doubt, in the form of reports of police commissions, surveys of public opinion, and reports on specific instances of brutality. 9. An episode that took place last year is illustrative. As the People's Union for Democratic Rights reconstructed the story, in an area of Delhi known as Simapuri on June 1, 1990, Shammu Khan, 22, and his friend Ismail got into a quarrel. As they scuffled, Shammu stabbed Ismail, who was rushed to a doctor. Shammu was arrested and taken to the local police station. 4 days later, Ismail had recovered but Shammu was dead. A migrant to Delhi together with his family about 10 or 12 years earlier, Shammu Khan was the sole supporter of his wife, infant son, mother and sister. He was employed at a cycle factory and supplemented his meager wage from time to time by pulling a rickshaw. The area of Delhi in which he lived had been settled in recent years by poor people, many of them migrants from rural areas or refugees from Bangladesh. Ismail practiced a trade typical of the area, rag picking. On the night of the stabbing, Shammu Khan was picked up by 2 policemen from a nearby station at about 11:30 p.m. They began beating and kicking him as they took him away and did the same to a watchmaker who had been sleeping outside his shop, who was taken along by the police for reasons that are not clear. On the way to the police station, the 2 officers were joined by 4 other policemen who joined in beating both men. All this was witnessed by neighbors of the 2 arrested men as well as by Shammu Khan's family. By about 4 a.m., Shammu was in bad shape and was taken by the police to a hospital in the area. The police told the doctor that Shammu Khan was drunk and, as the PUDR reported, the doctor duly attested that he was drunk and declared him otherwise well. He was sent back to the police station. There he was seen a few hours later by a group of residents of Simapuri who had come to try to free the watchmaker. Those who saw him did not think Shammu looked well, as his face was covered with flies and he had apparently vomited blood. The police seemed eager to get rid of Shammu and asked the residents who had come for the watchmaker if they would like to take Shammu as well. As he had stabbed someone, however, the residents had no sympathy for Shammu and refused to bail him out. A little later, Shammu Khan's mother succeeded in getting the police to hospitalize her son again. Again the police told the doctor he was drunk, adding that he might have consumed some poisonous substance. This time Shammu remained in the hospital under constant police guard, with his wife at his side. He died there 3 days later. The police denied all allegations of violence. They stuck to their story that Shammu Khan had been drunk and died because he consumed an unknown poison. Residents of Simapuri did not believe this. Several thousand took part in a demonstration when Shammu's body was brought back to the neighborhood and they blocked traffic for hours. The participants included those who previously had no sympathy for Shammu Khan and had refused to bail him out. A magisterial inquiry was ordered, but in the past the results of such inquiries have not been made public. The PUDR, which conducted its own investigation, is pressing for a public report. A few weeks after the death of Shammu Khan, another killing in police custody in Delhi also sparked a street demonstration. According to the People's Union for Democratic Rights, Joginder Pal Gupta, 37, went to the Model Town Police Town on August 21, 1990 to complain about an anonymous threatening phone call, apparently arising out of a neighborhood dispute. The next morning, his wife learned that he had been brought dead to Hindu Rao Hospital at 5:30 am. Thousands of residents of Joginder's neighborhood took to the streets in protest, and the stories on this protest that appeared in the Delhi newspapers on August 23 prompted an investigation by the PUDR. That investigation established that the person who made the threatening call was apparently involved in what happened to Joginder Pal Gupta at the police station. According to the police version of the episode, Joginder was not detained but remained at the station overnight voluntarily and died of a heart attack. PUDR did not find this persuasive, pointing out that when Joginder's body turned up at the hospital, it was severely mutilated, joints were broken, rope marks and cigarette burns were all over the body, and his clothes, cash, gold chain and ring were missing. 10. The Bombay Committee for the Protection of Democratic Rights (CPDR) succeeded in one of the cases it investigated in 1990 in examining a copy of a coroner's post-mortem report that verified its finding that a death in police custody resulted from torture. The case involved Raju Mohite, 26, married and the father of a 2-year-old son who lived with his 5 brothers and their father and mother in a slum, Andheri. Raju ran a tea shop at his home. On June 26, 1990, he was arrested on a charge that he had been involved in a robbery. Apparently Raju was named as one of the participants by a boy, or 2 boys, who had previously been arrested in the case and beaten to name others who were involved. Raju was produced before a magistrate on June 27 and again on July 3 and remanded to police custody until July 17. On July 5, he was brought before a magistrate again, discharged by the police, given 10 rupees about 60 cents, and sent home. Though he could barely walk as a result of torture, he made it home in an auto rickshaw. His brothers took him to a hospital where, apparently because they feared he might not be admitted if they attributed his injuries to the police, they said that Raju had been assaulted by unknown persons. The hospital notified the police and an inspector came by. After being assured Raju would get treatment, one of his brothers told the inspector what had happened. The next day several policemen came to the hospital and offered Raju's brother money and tried to persuade him to shift Raju to another hospital. While the police were still at the hospital, Raju died. According to the CPDR, we were told by those who saw Raju when he was brought before the magistrate on July 5 for discharge, that he could barely walk. There were wounds all over his body, his thighs were swollen, and except for a thin loin cloth there were no clothes on his body. Though it was quite obvious that Raju had been brutally tortured by the police, the magistrate made no inquiries from him and he was left to fend for himself. Instead he mechanically granted the discharge requested by the police. The magistrate is required by law to inquire from the detainee whether he was ill-treated or whether he requires medical or legal aid. None of this was done. 11. The coroner's post-mortem report showed contusions all over Raju Mohit's body that had been suffered within 4 days of his death as a result of being struck with a hard and blunt object. A death in policy custody in Delhi that took place subsequent to our visit to India involved a chokada, watchman, at an electricity substation in the R.K. Puram neighborhood. A theft of electric cable from the substation had been reported to the police. The chokada, Ram Swaroop, was arrested for this offense on January 28 or 29, 1991. There is disagreement between his wife and the police as to when the arrest occurred. By January 31, he was dead. During this period he was not produced before a magistrate even though, if the police version of when he was arrested is accurate, that is January 29, he should have been arraigned by January 30. According to the police, however, this was not required because he was released for a period, and then rearrested. The People's Union for Democratic Rights, which investigated the case, reports that in the night before Ram Swaroop was reported to have died, the police informed his wife that he was ill, that he needed medicine, and that she should give them his old medical records. The records she gave them showed he had once been treated for tuberculosis, and the police subsequently said he died of a tuberculosis attack. A nephew of Ram Swaroop who lived in his home wanted to return to the police station with the police to see him, but at that point one of the police told the nephew his uncle was dead. The body was eventually turned over to the family for cremation. Those who saw the body said that the marks of torture were clearly visible. The PUDR points out that Ram Swaroop had been given a medical fitness certificate after he was treated at a hospital for tuberculosis many years earlier, that he had been certified as medically fit by the chief medical officer for the electricity company that employed him, and that he had not suffered any bout of ill health in the years since he had been treated for tuberculosis. The police claim that he died of tuberculosis was made before a post-mortem was conducted. At the time we obtained a copy of the PUDR's investigative report, the organization was still calling for public release of the post-mortem report. After Ram Swaroop's death, the union at the electricity substation organized a large demonstration at the police station where he died and cut off power to the police station. The demonstration brought the matter to public attention and precipitated the suspension of 2 police officers. Women in police detention. For women who are detained by the police, a particular danger is rape in custody. Many of the victims are migrant women who lack the established community connections that would make protests in their behalf effective. Renu Mandal, 27, had arrived in Delhi from West Bengal in January 1990, just 5 days before the incident that led to her rape in police custody. She settled in an area known as Chitranjan Park that is largely populated by Bengali migrants, moving in with her sister and her sister's husband. On January 11, Renu quarreled with a neighbor's child and slapped the child. The episode escalated into a dispute between the 2 families. 2 police officers who were in the neighborhood at the time intervened and took Renu and her brother-in-law into custody. The brother-in-law was beaten and released. Renu was detained and raped. Shortly afterwards, she was released. When she got back to her sister's home, She related what had happened to her, and her brother-in-law and others took her to see a local official to complain. In addition, she was examined at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences to verify what happened to her. As a consequence, one police officer was dismissed and another was suspended. It is impossible to assess the frequency of custodial rape, but one indication is that the Delhi police themselves acknowledge 14 cases in which 24 police officers were accused and suspended or dismissed over a 2-year period from 1988 to 1990, among them the 2 officers involved in Renu Mandal's case. According to the PUDR, chance circumstances brought these cases to light. Otherwise they probably would have gone unreported. To a far greater extent than in Western countries, the victims of rape risk punishment themselves or ostracism if what happened to them becomes known. They may be rejected by their husbands and families, and, in the case of unmarried girls, the chances of marriage are reduced drastically. Such crime statistics as are available in India make it seem that rape is exceedingly rare. 12 gross underreporting seems the best explanation. See also, women in the prisons, below. In the case of rape in custody, the factors that militate against reporting are especially great. It is unlikely that the woman's shame would ever be known by anyone other than the victim and her rapists if she maintains silence. The fear of further retribution is especially great when it is the police who are the rapists. The woman has little or no opportunity to raise a prompt outcry after the rape, and the almost certain result of a complaint is that the victim would suffer more while nothing would happen to her rapists. Even the chance circumstances that did result in the suspension or dismissal of 24 Delhi police officers for raping detainees in a 2-year period did not lead to criminal convictions of any of those officers, though some cases were still pending when the police report was issued. 13. At times, custodial rape has become so notorious that it has stirred popular protests. One such protest took place in the state of Andhra Pradesh in January 1990. As the Indian newspaper, Sunday Observer, reported last Tuesday, the entire area witnessed a bandh strike against the ongoing police atrocities. The action was triggered off after an alleged rape of 3 women committed by 3 local police constables on 3 successive days. Although this latest incident is being denied, local people have come forward and detailed past instances about the threats wielded by the policemen involved in the alleged rape. Kanakaiah, Venkateshwaralu and Vijaykumar, already suspended in connection with the latest episode, were often named in these accounts of threats to local women to submit to their lustful desires. If any of the men interfered, the policemen would silence them with threats of booking them as Naxalites, a radical movement that has been involved in many crimes of violence. See below. 14. Not all of the violence against women in police lockups is of a sexual character, as the Bombay Lawyers Collective has reported after interviewing all the women held in the Bombay Central Jail in 1987. More than 50% of the women interviewed complained of violence and abuse in police custody. Women have complained of being whipped with belts, especially on the thigh and upper leg, or being hung with a pole around the back of the neck and arms, or being caned on the palms and on the soles of their feet till they are swollen and tender, having their hair yanked by 2 policemen from either side, and all this to the accompaniment of abuse and threats of worse to come. One deaf and dumb girl whom we interviewed went through all the physical motions of falling flat on her face and pulling her hair and hitting herself while all the time crying, in an attempt to explain how badly she was beaten. Last month, a girl who was 3 months pregnant was taken from the jail into police custody for interrogation on suspicion in a new case. The next day she was produced before the magistrate, where she was found to have been whipped. There were huge black bruises all over her hands and legs. 15. The purposes of torture in some countries. Police torture of detainees is intended primarily to coerce a confession or to obtain a guilty plea. Where torture is a tool of political repression, a principal purpose is to force the victim to name others who may be involved in some real or imaginary conspiracy. Though coercing confessions or forcing defendants to name accomplices may be factors in India, this does not explain the extent of mistreatment in custody in India. For one thing, Indian law makes an extrajudicial confession inadmissible at trial. In that respect, Indian law seems to protect defendants more than they are protected in the US, where, under the Supreme Court's Miranda decision, they are only entitled to a warning about their rights and not to be interrogated in the absence of counsel if they express a desire to exercise their rights. The rule making confessions to the police inadmissible is less protective than it seems at first, however, because evidence obtained as a result of such a confession, such as the location of stolen property, is admissible. 16 Also, Indian defense lawyers told us, many persons who confess to the police then feel that they must also confess when they appear before a magistrate. Yet confessions are not needed in many cases. By comparison to many other countries, India does not seem to have a high level of street crime. 17 Time and again, when we asked those familiar with the prisons and police lockups to describe the typical detainee, they cited the example of poor people from rural areas coming into the cities and boarding trains without paying the fare. 18 In such cases, the testimony of the arresting officer ought to suffice. There is probably no need to coerce a confession. Similarly, in cases like that of Shammu Khan, where violence erupts between acquaintances, a confession would not ordinarily be needed. Not only the victim but also those who summoned the police could provide testimony. 19 There is nothing new about police torture in India. Indeed, we believe that tradition is an important factor in the prevalence of torture, that is, the police torture because they have always tortured. In 1854 a commission was established by a British governor, for the investigation of alleged cases of torture at Madras. Within a brief period, nearly 2,000 complaints of torture were lodged with the commission. That body found torture was prevalent and reported. Among the principal tortures in vogue in police cases we find the following: twisting a rope tightly around the entire arm or leg so as to impede circulation, lifting up by the mustache, suspending by arms while tied behind the back, searing with hot irons, placing scratching insects, such as the carpenter beetle, on the navel, scrotum and other sensitive parts, dipping in wells and rivers, till the party is half suffocated, squeezing the testicles, beating with sticks, prevention of sleep, nipping the flesh with pincers, putting pepper or red chilies in the eyes or introducing them into the private parts of men or women. These cruelties occasionally persevered until death sooner or later ensues. 20 In the 136 years since that report was issued, many commissions, some national, some at the state level, have examined police torture and come up with similar findings. The judiciary has similarly denounced torture. In a famous decision of the Allahabad High Court in 1964, Judge Shri Mullah wrote that, in the entire country there is not another criminal force whose misdeeds can come anywhere near the list of crimes of that organized body called the Indian Police Force. 21 Inspector Misra, who served as director of a National Police Commission which was appointed in November 1977 and issued its report in June 1980, writes that, the current methodology of third degree does not show any remarkable refinement over the methods described by the 1854-5 Torture Commission. 22.